So, Sonic Frontiers, the new open world / open zone Sonic game coming later this year. This game is looking really promising. I'm basing this off of the fairly steady amount of content being revealed about the game. In fact, when I was first trying to upload this video, lots of new information dropped about the game, including new footage and hands-on impressions. It's funny, the more info that gets released about Sonic Frontiers, the better it starts sounding. The new footage looks really good and does the game way more justice than the original reveal that we got. But that original reveal was all we had at one point, and it still needs to be talked about because it was a bad reveal. The initial reveal was 7 minutes long, with no commentary, no context, and it was essentially a showing of what it would be like to traverse around the area and to give a feel of what the gameplay might be like. This approach might be engaging for some games, but it does not work in this scenario. The worst part about this whole situation is that there was a lot of people interested in what this game could be, since an open world Sonic game is a promising idea. But then this was the reveal that they were met to, and it was a terrible first impression. People everywhere have been bashing the game since, and for good reason. Since that reveal, there has been more footage. We got another video with no commentary that was 6 minutes long, and this video showcased the combat that Sonic Frontiers has to offer that was entirely avoided in the first showcase. I have a lot I want to talk about regarding both of these reveals. There's both good and bad, and things need to be discussed. I should note that after these reveals, it has been confirmed that the footage is from an early build of the game, so some of the issues I talk about may have already been fixed, but this is what we were shown, so this is what I'll be going over. The showcase opens up and the graphics and the environment look good, but we already knew this from earlier trailers. Though there is the new argument I've been seeing that this art style is too basic and generic, and I see where this point is coming from, but I personally like how it looks and there are definitely some cool things going on with the structures around the place. But back to the showcase, and since I'd already seen the graphics, the first thing that my eyes were drawn to were the weird placement of springs and rails. They're just floating there. And yes, this series is no stranger to this kind of object placement, but with linear level design and controlled camera movement, these kinds of things never look as out of place as this. Later on, when we see Sonic actually on the rails, suddenly they look fine, and that's exactly what I mean. What could be done to combat this is to have a mechanic where you flick a switch and then the objects will appear for a limited amount of time. That would get rid of the clutter around the map, and maybe it's not the best solution, but the way it is right now also doesn't look great in my eyes. Back to the gameplay again, we see Sonic punch some boxes for some collectibles, and then right after he climbs the tower, getting 4 purple coins along the way. When he did finally reach the top, I was curious to see what might happen. I was expecting something like Breath of the Wild, where climbing a tower like this would do something, so you're incentivized to climb those towers. So what if Sonic Team put at the top of the tower to reward you for climbing it? From what we were shown, it looks like the only thing at the top was 5 rings. And then you just go on the grind rails to get off the tower. Now it did look like you could do something else up there. Maybe if you stand in the middle of this triangle something will happen, but the person playing here decided instead it would be more fun to slowly walk around it. And since I didn't step in the middle, I have no idea if it does anything. But I'm going to hope that it does something, because otherwise this tower seems almost entirely pointless besides a very small number of collectibles. And we have no idea what those collectibles do because nothing was explained to us, and therefore, by extension, none of those collectibles mean anything to us. Oh, so you can collect these red and blue fruits? That's cool and all, but if I don't know what they do, then why should I care about them? What's the point? And that phrase, "what's the point," is something both me and a lot of other people were thinking when watching this gameplay reveal. So there's this big open area that you can run around in, and what do you do in this open world? You can collect rings, solve basic puzzles, get collectibles, but none of that means anything since we aren't being told what any of those collectibles do. Also, when we do get those collectibles, what's the reason to ever go back to those areas? I'm guessing the collectibles won't be respawning, so are these platforming challenges just going to stay here floating in the sky, but empty and with no reason to go back to them? Huh. So yeah, what is the point? I mean, I guess you can still have fun running around. Maybe there's some interesting loops or hills you can mess around on to play with momentum, get a bunch of speed, maybe launch yourself around the map. Nope. At least, it sure doesn't look like it from what we were shown. You can run around, sure, but it seems like the speed is consistent regardless of whether you're going uphill or downhill. I should say that this isn't inherently a bad thing, and it makes movement more consistent, accessible, and easy to understand. But it would be nice if there was some momentum to mess around with, because it would give traversal more depth. I'll give an example of what I mean. Now there are 3D Sonic games that use a lot of momentum, such as the adventure games, but I'm going to be using the fan game titled Project Hero to show what I'm talking about. Since Frontiers has a consistent top speed, let's imagine that the default max running speed in this fan game is Frontiers' top speed. Since there is no momentum in play, it doesn't matter where Sonic runs, there will be almost no changes in his speed. So essentially, this is the speed that he will always be traveling. But with momentum in play, there is still that default top running speed, but if he reaches a downward incline of any kind, he's going to gain more speed. This would make moving around the map so much more dynamic. If you use momentum to your advantage, you can travel around the area at a much faster pace. And you also don't have to use momentum because the default top running speed is still there for people who don't know how to take advantage of it. Momentum obviously creates a skill gap, but I don't see that as a bad thing because of the depth it would add. I'll show another example. Let's say the goal is to reach up here. If you don't build up momentum, there is no way to make this jump and get up there. But you can still get there because there is a normal path to get to that spot. But then here comes a player who has built up momentum, and because of their speed, they can make that jump and get there much faster. Was using momentum to get to this spot necessary? Absolutely not. And that's the fun of it, giving you new ways to explore the environment around you. Either way, Sonic Frontiers doesn't seem to have momentum, and that's okay. The game can still be fun without momentum, but I hope I explained well as to why I think it would have been good to have even just some momentum as part of Sonic's moveset. Speaking of moveset, I should probably talk about how Sonic plays in Sonic Frontiers. It seems like Sonic Team used his Sonic Forces actions as a base, and then worked from there. So because of that, there's lots of the same elements. He can jump, double jump, homing attack, quick step, stomp, rail grind, and kind of boost? But not quite. There's a move in this game that seems incredibly similar to the boost but repurposed. To me, it looks like the boost is now more of a run button. And this makes a lot of sense actually, since putting Sonic into an open world with puzzles and such without some way to regulate his speed might have been a bad idea. It's worth noting though that even when he is using the run button, he's still not that fast all things considered. This means Sonic should be easy enough to control even at top speed, but I honestly can't help but feel like this is a bit too slow. It's also worth mentioning that this move can be used in the air for an air dash and on grind rails for a burst of speed. The move basically is a boost, but I think the difference is that you can use this for as long as you want. And I'll bet you also can't just barrel through enemies unlike how the boost normally is. There's a few other additions to the moveset like the trick system from Sonic Generations and the wall climbing from the esteemed Zelda Breath of the Wild. But most of Sonic's actual new moveset is found with the new combat system introduced in this game. We didn't get to see any of this in the first gameplay reveal, which in my opinion is another one of the reasons why the showcase was so lacking. But for the sake of talking about Sonic's moveset, I'll talk about the combat shown in the second showcase now. Alongside his homing attack, he can also punch and kick on both the ground and the air. To get enemies in the air, he can use this move that leaves a trail behind him, and when you complete a circle, anything inside of it gets launched up in the air. There's also these special moves, as I'm going to call them, that look a lot more flashy than the basic attacks, and I'm guessing they do a lot more damage too. Other than that, there's a dodge, but that's all that we were shown. The combat reveal was definitely more promising than the gameplay reveal, but there were still worries that weren't addressed within the video and were only talked about later on. Worries like, if these were all the moves that Sonic can pull off, then combat will probably get boring pretty quickly. Even the boss that was shown looked pretty boring. I liked the design and I liked the idea of Sonic fighting some huge enemy, but I was disappointed because the fight looked so easy to beat. It looked like you would have a harder time with the lesser enemies, and I wish I was joking. And that's it. Those are the two showcases that were shown to us, with the first one in particular getting a fairly negative reaction. There is new stuff I need to go over that redeems a lot of the bad elements of those reveals, but unfortunately before that, I need to talk about more problems with the showcases that I was waiting until the end of this segment to talk about. Alright, pop-in. Oh, the pop-in. Now pop-in is normal for games, especially open world games, but sometimes it's handled well and sometimes it's not. These showcases were an example of it not being handled the best, especially since there are so many examples for me to show. There are a few ways it can be handled better. One way is giving the pop-in an animation. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but in my opinion, even a little fade, like how it's done in Breath of the Wild, makes the pop-in or pop-out a lot less jarring. But I think the ideal method is having low poly model substitutes so that when the higher poly model does pop in, it isn't as noticeable. This is something that's used in games all the time, and even in this game because you can see it pretty easily every time the camera jumps around, that things are often unloaded or in very low detail. This is obviously another issue because there's no way you're meant to see the world in this kind of detail, but going back to pop in, certain things pop in when they are way too close to you. For example, I have no idea what this thing means, but why does it only appear when Sonic is right beside it? If this ends up being something you want to look for, then it will be so easy to miss since it doesn't spawn in unless you're right beside it. Another thing I couldn't help but notice while watching was the animation. Now some of it looks good, I like the new ramp animation, and some of the new combat moves look really clean. But then there's also stuff like this. In between punches and kicks, Sonic straight up defies gravity and starts standing in the air. Here's another one that looks really bad, and it's the trick system. What's weird in this case is that most of the animations are just sped up versions of the tricks from Generations. But the difference is that they actually look good in Generations. How about the rail grinding? Is it fair to say that this doesn't look great? Why does the animation from 14 years ago look so much smoother? And the punches? They're so rigid and have no impact. Look no further than Smash Bros to see a better animation. There are other examples than what I've mentioned, but I don't want to be here all day harping on the animations. Okay, one last thing I want to talk about that annoys me is the automation. Automation is when control is taken away from the player and the game essentially plays itself. And I should say that it isn't always bad. I think automation is fine in certain areas of games. But in this open world or open zone Sonic game, what is this? Maybe it's a stupid thing to be annoyed over, but do the developers not trust the player to be able to walk around this corner? Just place some rings if you wanted them to go around. And there's other examples of weird dash panel placements where control will be taken away from you as you're shot in a specific direction. My only question is, why is this necessary? I have a feeling I might find traveling around the map annoying if I accidentally hit a dash pad and then suddenly I just start going somewhere I don't want to go. I mean it when I say I don't like being negative, but all the things I've been mentioning need to be pointed out so they can potentially be made better before release. But since the game is coming out in about half a year, I doubt there will be any time for big changes. I'm hoping at least some of the animations can be smoothed out and that the pop-in can be fixed or improved, but who knows what can be done. I'm no game developer, so I wouldn't know. And since it's an old build of the game, maybe all of these things have been addressed, but there's no way of us knowing. I stand by thinking that the original no commentary reveal of Sonic Frontiers was handled terribly. Mainly for the reason that we didn't know what was going on or what you're meant to be doing in this open world. Since then though, IGN have released a first impressions video where they talk about the game after playing it for about 4 hours. It's within that review that we learned a lot more about what to expect from the game. Here's a summary of how the gameplay will flow. So you explored the islands, and while you're exploring, you can complete puzzles to open up each island more. While you're doing this, you can also get collectibles to improve your stats, and defeat enemies to get experience points that can be used to unlock moves in the skill tree. Then there are world bosses that you can defeat to unlock portal gears. These portal gears unlock traditional linear 3D Sonic levels. And within those levels are optional missions such as collecting all the red rings or beating the stage in a certain amount of time. And completing those missions grant you vault keys which can then be used to get the Chaos Emeralds. And there, just in that short description of how the game will be played, it already sounds like a much more promising game. I'm really glad that there will be more to the game than just these open world environments, and don't get me wrong, I'm looking forward to exploring those, but having the traditional stages alongside the open world sounds like a really good combination. Though we aren't sure what those traditional levels will play like yet. I'm assuming it will be similar to the Boost games, but maybe we'll get something more akin to the adventure games. Supposedly we're going to find out more information about these levels at the end of this month, so I might make a follow-up video once we get to that point. Thanks to that new footage and new hands-on impressions that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, there are some small details about this game that sound very interesting. It seems like Sonic is going to have 2 modes, an action mode and a high speed mode that you can choose between. The action mode will be slower but easier to control, and the high speed option will be much faster but a bit more loose with its controls. This explains why Sonic can look so slow at times with the footage we've seen. It's also gotten me curious to see just how much faster Sonic is with the high speed option. I'm guessing we'll be shown the differences at some point. However, regardless of what mode for Sonic you pick, it looks like you'll be able to upgrade Sonic's speed anyway alongside his attack, defense, and ring capacity through gathering collectibles. We really should have been told all of these gameplay details from the get-go, and I'll bet that if we had been, then public reception to the game would have been a whole lot better than what we ended up with. Alright, that's all I really wanted to talk about. I think Frontiers looks promising. It has its issues, but overall I'm excited for it and I'm definitely looking forward to learning more about it. I was originally going to end the video here, but I just found it strange that we are yet to get a good trailer showing off the gameplay of this game. So I took liberty of piecing together the footage we've been shown and making my own trailer for a bit of fun. Other than that, this is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed and thank you for watching.